Meanwhile, the United States has started the deployment of 3,000 strong units of its infantry to the Baltics to hold a 3-month exercise with Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia. Latvia has also confirmed more than 120 armoured units, including tanks, have been delivered by the United States. Now, I'm joined by James Jatris, former advisor to the US Senate Republican leadership. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us here on RT International. What do you think, then, is the actual purpose of these drills?
It's saber-rattling. It's a show of force to reiterate the American political commitment to defend the Baltic states under Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. The irony is, of course, is that 3,000 troops are nowhere sufficient to defend these countries if there really were a threat to them, which there is not. The only way they could actually be defended would be through a nuclear threat, in effect exchanging Chicago to defend Narva, which I don't think most Americans would be in favor of if they knew even where Narva was.
Well, you've touched, sorry to interrupt, James, you touched on it there. Do you think the fears within some in the Baltic nations of a possible Russian invasion are in any way justified?
No, I do not think so. I think this is, again, just a show of force, and partly it exposes NATO's and Washington's impotence over events in Ukraine. Now that we see much more that the Europeans seem to be decoupling their policy from Washington's guidance, I think there's a sense of frustration that our hold over European security through NATO is somewhat in danger. So again, this is a political show even more than a military show.
Will this be more reassuring, or will this actually potentially increase tensions in and around Europe?
I think it increases tensions in the sense that for the United States to insert this kind of force in the Baltic state, again, right on Russia's doorstep, simply, I think, adds insult to injury to the fact that we have expanded NATO so extensively in Russia's direction, not for any legitimate security purpose, but simply because we can. It looked like a cost-free exercise at the time it was done. Now the tensions are rising between the United States and Russia. There are costs associated with it. It does contribute to a kind of hair-trigger atmosphere, which is in nobody's interest.
Well, Russia says that NATO military exercises close to its borders, they're harmful for relations. So why do you think, then, that the US and NATO are actually continuing with this form of action?
Well, I think one reason of it is directed against the Europeans because they seem to be more willing to patch things up with the Russians over Ukraine. And I think it is designed in part as an irritant, just as it would be, for example, if the Russians were to be staging exercises in the Caribbean off the American coast.
OK, James Jatris, former advisor to the Republican Senate leaders, thank you very much for joining us here on RT International.
Thank you.